Mr. Martin, how you doing, sir?
Very well. Happy to be here.
This is Andy Martin. He has over 10 years of technical and management experience in building, designing, and constructing control systems and project management. That was a mouthful. Most of which were with mission-critical facilities like data centers and hospitals. He holds a Master's of Science in Software Engineering from the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, which of course is why he could join me here today, because he's local to the cities. And you will know that we are properly socially distancing, even though it looks like we're far away. He has had full responsibility for tons of scopes of work, including P&L on many multi-million-dollar complex contracts, like data centers, hospitals, and even an NFL stadium. And I can guess which one that is, I think.
Take a wild guess, you'll probably be pretty close.
Guess. He can't tell anyone, but you know, we live here at where the Vikings play. So Andy is the president and founder of BlueRithm, which is SaaS, focused on streamlining mission-critical and commercial commissioning efforts. And so people who have no idea what that is, I'm going to talk a little bit. So I was an electrician for just like the blink of an eye before I decided I wanted to go write code for a living. And I remember on one of these things, so we were installing pipe and running wire. And I remember we built a big data center and I say we, I was like an apprentice, right? But we built a big data center in the Bay Area. And I had to carry around this clipboard and I had to follow an engineer around. And it was a big checklist of all this stuff as they would turn on the uninterruptible power supplies, the UPSs, and then they would turn the generator on and they'd make sure that the fail-safe tripped and there was an automatic switch breaker and blah, blah, blah. And you had to test all this crap because once it's live and you have 1,000 servers in there, it can't break, right? And so that's commissioning. And that's what BlueRithm does, is it takes that clipboard, or the 5 clipboards that we used to carry around, and all the paper that we then had to fax to people, right? That's how old I am. And it puts it into SaaS.
Exactly.
Is that the idea?
Exactly, yeah. It's just it's a project management tool for that specific situation. So, you know, if you're the person building the data center, you might hire somebody who's one of our customers. And our customers will take our software and they'll go through their checklist. It'll create the reports for them and just really kind of automate everything.
Right, and I love it because it's such a niche, right? There's so much value in not, you know, you're not competing against whatever, MailChimp is an ESP, or, you know, these other big players, Google. Like, you've picked such a small slice that really, you know, Microsoft's not going to come build commissioning software, you know, or Google or Facebook. Like, you are in a place, obviously you have bigger competitors than you, but it's not something that they're going to come and attack. And I asked you about MRR, you're 5-figure MRR, which for folks who are counting, that means $10,000 or more in MRR, just to give you an idea of, you know, of where he lands. You're Minneapolis based. I think we already mentioned that, which is why we can hang out. And really, my first serious question for you is longboard or shortboard, sir? Actually,
wakeboard.
Wakeboard.
As a Western kid, that's kind of what I've grown up doing, and actually did a round this past weekend, which I'm still feeling the effects of.
Store from, yeah. So a wakeboard, you pull on the back of a boat, right, and you stand up on it. So it's as close as you can kind of get to surfing on the boat.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you surf in the Midwest, I guess.
10,000 lakes, you don't have much tide for a longboard. So obviously this was a pain point, you know, to build BlueRithm, like the origin story. Since you were involved in this commissioning, this was a pain point that you were experiencing. But you weren't a developer. I know you had toyed around with some stuff. But like, what made you think that you could build the prototype of BlueRithm, not having ever built, you know, really built production code?
Yeah, so I guess I didn't know for sure that I could, but I also didn't know that I couldn't. So I really just wanted to try. So that's what I did. I just kind of started tinkering at first and just kind of testing the waters. I tested the market a little bit. I did some outreach, just put some feelers out, and it just kept building and building. And I got good response from people and decided to just keep at it.
Yeah. And so when you started building BlueRithm, was there existing software already doing this? And if so, why did you think, you know, what edge did you think you had? What did you think you could do better?
Sure. So yeah, there were some existing solutions out there. So that gave me just a little bit of confidence that there was a market. You know, there was people paying money for a solution like this. But the existing options were either real old legacy platforms that were kind of on the downslope of their life cycle, or there's a couple newer, real modern SaaS, you know, web-based platforms that are out there, and they just have real clunky pricing models. They're not as easy to do business with. So I felt like there was an opportunity to get in. It's not a saturated market. Over half of this industry is not using a SaaS solution right now. They're using a combination of homegrown tools, access databases, maybe some cloud file storage. So lots of opportunity for them to streamline and really come on board with a modern web platform to manage their projects.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
And so how, in an industry like this, obviously you're not going to be able to run, I shouldn't say not, but I'm guessing Facebook ads is not going to work in your space, you know, and even like Google AdWords and LinkedIn are going to be they're going to be tough traffic channels. So, you know, are there a couple kind of lead gen avenues that have really worked for you?
Yeah, it's been tricky. It still is tricky. So whatever we do, it just has to be very, very targeted. So yes, Facebook ads are difficult. We're trying some different things with just promoting blog posts to a retargeted audience or lookalike audiences. So still very, very narrow. Same thing with Google Ads. So any paid acquisition, we're keeping it very small, very focused. And the things that have really, I think, moved the needle are kind of the in-person events. So we go to industry conferences. It's such a small community that if you're not at those events, you're really kind of not part of the industry and the community. So, you know, last year once we started showing up to those events, it really just gets our name out there. People see that we're serious and we're here to stay and make a long-term push in the market. So, the in-person events at conferences, you know, setting up a booth, talking to people face to face, and cold outreach has been a good channel for us too. Which is difficult, and there's some good and bad ways to do that, but had some success there. Just some people just, you know, aren't aware or just aren't currently, you know, in the mindset where they're looking, so they just need that little extra prompt to get them interested.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing is, you know, I'll hear people say that, let's say cold email is dead, or that, you know, trade shows and events aren't worth it. But in these small niches where there are only thousands of potential customers, you know, or maybe tens of thousands, but there aren't that many, that oftentimes that still works. You know, if you're trying to cold email, I'm trying to, you know, if you're trying to cold email startup founders today, or startup executives or whatever, it's pretty saturated. It's still possible, you can, but it takes a lot of time. But in a space like that maybe isn't inundated, you know, I think there's a lot of room there.
Yep.
So you started working on BlueRithm part-time about 4 years ago. It was 2016. You toiled part-time for 2 years, and you told me offline before we chatted, you had a bunch of beta users coming really early. They would come in, they'd use it, and they would churn out. Like, what was going on there? What was the issue? Because I'm sure there are folks listening right now who are in exactly the same position that you were 2 years ago.
Yeah, so for better or worse, I took the path of getting something put together, getting a usable product. I don't know if you call it an MVP or not, but getting something there where people could come in and use it. So I was just testing the product, testing to see what people would respond to. And I got a huge amount of feedback. So it's not a approach that would work or I would advise in all situations, but for me, never having started a business before, let alone a software company, getting all that feedback early on really drove the direction that we ended up taking the company. And I think without that feedback, we would have toiled a lot longer and had a lot more difficulty reaching the point where we finally feel like we have product market fit, where we've figured out these different marketing channels and stuff. So just lots of experimentation, and some of those early adopters that are willing to give us a try, they're also willing to, you know, tell you how bad it sucks or give you some feedback that'll get you going in the right direction. So that's really what it was. It just was a product that wasn't quite ready yet.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, so many developers that I know go in their basement for 2 years and just code, and they don't have anybody use the app. Whereas you went counter to that. It sounds like intuitively your natural instinct was to let people use it early. Again, that's, even back in the day, that was not my instinct because I was scared and it was never good enough and it was never there. Why do you think you did that? Why do you think you did the opposite of what most people do?
Partly for the reasons I said, and partly just out of ignorance. Honestly, there were a couple times where I thought we had got it to a point where it was going to work and it was good enough, so to speak, but it wasn't. And those were just in terms of rejection and just the emotional response that I had, those were some of the toughest times. But you know, I just stuck with it, and I was like, you know, there's a response. People want this. If I keep at it, eventually we'll get this figured out, and eventually they'll, you know, the feedback will shift to more positive versus more negative.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. You spent 2 years part-time. Obviously, you were probably working a day job, right? And you had nights and weekends working on BlueRithm. 2 years is a long time. You're getting rejection. People are churning out. Why didn't you quit?
I think there was always enough momentum for me to keep pushing forward, and I just had strong desire to make it work. I'd always wanted to have something that I owned, that I created. I just liked the process of creating and getting the feedback, even though it's not always good, and taking that, adding it into the product, and then getting the feedback that says, "Hey, that's great. Thanks for doing that." So just the desire to see it through and to see it work, and just knowing that the market was there. It wasn't like I was trying to convince people to do something that they had never thought of or seen before.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it was just about a year ago, it was mid 2019 that you kind of call your soft launch, right? Where you actually feel like you kind of went all in. You said this is when things started growing for you. And I'm curious, is that when you went full time?
It is, yeah, May last year.
May of last year.
Yep.
And did you have enough revenue to cover your expenses, or did you have savings, or did you just jump off the diving?
Yeah, wasn't quite at a point where the business alone would have kept me going. So I had a fallback plan, which was some savings, which I did use some of. But yeah, I just had confidence that we were close enough to product market fit that it was going to work.
Yep.
Just because of who our customers are and how our pricing model works, it makes sense most of the time for people to pay annually. So even though our MRR, is maybe in 4 figures, the actual amount of money coming in the door was,
Yep.
In 5 figures potentially, or higher 4 figures. So I just had confidence that it was going to work out one way or another. And worst case, like I told you, I end up living in my parents' basement for a little bit, but
It happens.
It,
Sacrifices we make, right? As
yeah.
entrepreneurs, yeah.
So pulled the trigger. I figured if I'm going to make it work, I gotta be all in, and that's when I jumped off.
Yep. And he just said a pretty cool hack that I've heard many people mention. I've actually done it myself. Jason Cohen talked about it in one of the best talks about bootstrapping ever, called backing. What is it? Yeah, building the ideal bootstrap business, I believe. But it's the annual prepay. And if you're in a space where, as a bootstrapper, you can get your customers to annually prepay, you typically give them 2 months off, is how I would often work it. So you give them about a 16 and 2/3% discount. Then your cash flow is way more than your MRR, but that can allow you to either hire someone or allows you to quit your day job or whatever it is. I'm curious. So you had this 2 years of just 2 or 3 years of kind of toiling part-time and struggling. People are churning out. Then you had enough traction that you're like, I think we're almost at product market fit, and then you have achieved it at this point. What changed between those early high churn days and the past 12 months of kind of as your growth has accelerated? Like what's different?
Yeah, I can't point to one specific thing, but it's definitely just a combination of getting the messaging and the marketing, the positioning figured out. So we're talking to the right people. We're having the right people coming to talk to us about signing up. So they know what they're getting into. We know who we're talking to and what our ideal customer is looking for. And then just having that much time to work on the product and get it ready and get as closer. I can't say that we're 100% there, but getting much, much closer to product market fit.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Such an evolving process, and it's not binary, right? It's a continuum. It's like you notch it up from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50, 60, 70, and then oftentimes you'll find a new audience, and I don't know in your tight niche if it'll do that, but then you find a new audience that finds out about you, and then your aggregate product market fit actually goes down again, and then you have to work, because the new audience, you don't quite have it, right? You don't have all the features.
Yep.
As we kind of wrap up, you're in Tiny Seed Batch 2.
Yep.
And I'm curious why, like what made you decide to, first I'm curious how you heard about Tiny Seed, and second, what made you decide to apply? Because the application, you went middle of 2019, you went full time, and you would have applied probably 4 or 5 months later. It would have been November of 2019,
Yep.
and then you would have been accepted, I think, about 6-7 months ago. So first, where'd you hear about it, and second, what made you decide to apply?
So I had been a listener of Startups for the Rest of Us for a long time. So I that's probably where I heard about it, or just something related to that channel. And the idea was it wasn't so much a safety net, so to speak, but it was originally planned to be kind of an accelerant. So there were some other parts of the platform that we really needed to reach, to really get our platform built out and get to parity and exceed parity with the other options out there. And the plan was to take that and really just kind of throw the fuel on the fire. I felt like we had a really good idea of what we needed to do at that point, and I just wanted to do it faster, really.
Yeah. And has it accelerated for you?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, sir, we're at time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
All right, great having you.